What if death wasn't the worst part? What if I told you there was a punishment so cruel, so calculated in its torment, that death itself was the kindest part of it? No quick blade, no cleansing flame, just wood, nails, and your own body slowly turning against you. You've heard the word crucifixion. But do you truly understand it? Because beyond the polished crosses and comforting religious imagery lies a method of torture so purposefully savage it wasn't created simply to kill. It was built to dismantle a person, one agonizing breath at a time. This was Rome's darkest art. Close your eyes for a moment. It's midday in ancient Jerusalem. The heat presses down like a weight. Dust clings to your skin, and in the distance, echoing like a warning, you hear the sharp crack of a hammer. People gather, not in prayer, not in protest, but to witness. Their eyes settle on a shape nailed to wood. Something that was once human, now reduced to suffering. This isn't justice, it's theater. And the pain, that's the centerpiece. At its height, Rome was a master of law, architecture, and terror. While senators pontificated in marble forums, soldiers practiced cruelty in the dirt. Crucifixion wasn't just punishment. It was a display, an etched warning in living flesh. Slaves, dissidents, rebels, anyone who dared challenge the empire were nailed to beams and left exposed to the elements. It was always slow, always visible, always humiliating. And yet, today most people barely grasp what that really meant. This video changes that. We're going to strip away the myths, the sanitized stories, and dive headfirst into what crucifixion actually was. With archaeology, ancient writings, and the latest academic research, we'll look through the eyes of the condemned, the executioners, and the silent crowds who watched. Because crucifixion didn't just take life, it tore apart body, mind, and spirit. So let's not start at the end, let's begin where the torment truly started. Because before the nails came something even worse. To be sentenced to crucifixion wasn't just to be nailed to wood. No, first came the scourging, a brutal beating using a whip laced with bone and iron fragments. Each lash stripped flesh away like paper from bone, carving pain into every inch of the body. This wasn't about mercy. It was preparation, a way to weaken the body, to make the death that followed all the more drawn out. And drawn out it always was. That was the whole point. If this has already started to open your eyes, drop a comment and let us know what you think. And subscribe. We're just getting started. The truth behind this method gets worse, much worse. The cross you picture, symmetrical, elegant, was rarely used. Romans worked with what they had. Some crosses were simple stakes. Others looked like X's or crude lowercase t's. After the scourging, victims were forced to carry the horizontal beam, the patibulum, through the streets. It weighed more than 100 pounds. Their backs already shredded, they stumbled half naked while crowds jeered. This wasn't just death, it was humiliation, weaponized. Dr. Herschel Shanks, founder of the Biblical Archaeology Society, helped confirm through remains, like that of Yehohanan, discovered in a first-century tomb, that crucifixion wasn't symbolic, it was horrific. A nail, thick iron and bent, pierced Yehohanan's heel. Still embedded after 2,000 years, it tells a truth no ancient text dares. This wasn't just a way to die, it was a message left in bone. Now imagine being fastened not with rope, but with nails. Not through your palms as artists show, but through your wrists, between bones that could bear the weight. Why? Because nails in the palms would tear right through. But through the wrist, they hit the median nerve, sending lightning bolts of agony up your arm. Doctors today call it causalgia, a burning pain like fire beneath the skin. But pain wasn't the real killer. It was something much simpler: breath. Crucifixion kills by suffocation. The victim, sagging downward, couldn't exhale. To draw each breath, they had to push up on nailed feet or a jagged wooden seat, tearing already ruined skin with every desperate movement. Every breath was a choice: endure the pain or slowly drown in air. And this dragged on for hours, sometimes days. Birds circled, insects crawled into wounds. The victim urinated and defecated on themselves in front of everyone. There was no curtain, no dignity, just the slow public unraveling of a human soul. And the people? They watched. Some cheered, others cried, but no one helped. Because crucifixion wasn't just about ending a life. It was about showing everyone else what happened if you didn't fall in line. Rome wanted the world to see. At city gates, at crossroads, the crosses rose, not quietly, loudly. They screamed one thing: disobey, and this will be your fate. Seneca, the Roman philosopher, once wrote, "I see crosses there, not just of one kind, but fashioned in many ways. Some hang with their head to the ground, some impaled through the genitals, others with outstretched arms." This wasn't a standardized process. It was creative destruction, a form of art in the hands of cruelty. Hooked yet? Just wait. What's coming next will blow your mind. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating history. The Executioner's Symphony, Variations of the Cross. Crucifixion wasn't one method. It was a system of variations. And for Rome, every death was an opportunity to refine the performance. Because they didn't just punish, they experimented. Now picture a Roman military outpost stationed on the edge of the empire's reach. The heat shimmers above sand. Soldiers stand idle, watching as a condemned man is dragged forward, not toward a familiar cross, but toward something stranger, darker. A twisted structure, part pole, part scaffold, part torture device. The soldiers don't speak. They analyze, like artists eyeing a blank canvas, because to them, crucifixion wasn't just enforcement. It was craftsmanship. Rome didn't invent crucifixion. That grim credit goes further back, to the Assyrians and Persians. Alexander the Great used it too, punishing conquered cities with rows of impaled bodies. But it was Rome that took this brutal legacy and made it a central pillar of fear, a tool of domination and deterrence. And as the empire expanded, so did its innovation in pain. They invented styles, techniques, enhancements, to prolong suffering, to maximize shame, to make each execution unforgettable. When you hear crucifixion, you probably imagine a perfect T. But historical and archaeological sources show a much more diverse range of death machines. Crux commissa, that capital T shape, often used when many needed to die at once. Efficient. Crux emissa, the more familiar shape, vertical with a crossbeam slightly lower down. Crux simplex, just a single, upright each post, brutal in its simplicity. Crux decusata, an X shape, rare but deeply symbolic, especially in later religious traditions. These forms offered new ways to inflict suffering, giving the crowd slightly different spectacles to witness, and telling their own grim, haunting stories. Let me know if you want it more poetic, brutal, or cinematic. But why did they care so much about variety? Why not just stick to one method? Because every crucifixion was customized, tailored to fit the crime, to send a message, to match the status of the person being nailed. A disobedient slave? Simple stake. A captured enemy general or rebellious leader? something more elaborate, more painful, more poetic. New Testament scholar John Dominic Crossan notes that crucifixion, in Rome's eyes, wasn't primarily about execution. It was about domination. Rome could afford to be creative. And the more inventive the display, the clearer the threat. No one is above our reach. The seat of shame. One of the Romans' most disturbing inventions was the sedile, a small, jagged wooden post positioned beneath the victim. Not for comfort, for endurance. It gave just enough support to prevent suffocation, but forced the body to remain upright in agony, hours, even days longer. Imagine the weight of your body pressing down on a splintered stake, nails ripping your skin every time you lifted to breathe. This wasn't compassion. It was surgical prolonging, a calculated stretch of time and suffering. The foot puzzle. Movies often show the feet crossed neatly and nailed together. Reality was messier. Often the feet were pinned separately, on either side of the upright post. Why? Because it kept the body from shifting, from finding any small relief. When Jehohanan's remains were uncovered in Jerusalem, archaeologists found an iron spike through his heel, angled sideways, bone shattered. The nail was bent intentionally so it couldn't be pulled out. Why target the heel? Because in ancient belief, the heel symbolized mobility, freedom. To destroy the heel was to stamp out escape, to chain the spirit itself. Think of the images you've seen, paintings, statues, gleaming crosses lit by golden sunsets. Now forget all that. There were no rolling hills of peace, no divine serenity, only pain, dirt, flies, and the stench of death. And the suffering didn't stay in the body. It infected the mind. People crucified weren't silent. They screamed. They begged. Some hallucinated, starved, dehydrated, bleeding. They slipped in and out of consciousness, dreaming and waking into horror again. One account speaks of a man biting off his own tongue just to die faster. Another speaks of a rebel who clung to life for 3 full days, singing, sobbing, delirious. A living corpse that wouldn't die. And the crowd, they kept watching. Crucifixions weren't private affairs. They were staged. At city gates, at high-traffic roads, at popular hillsides, everyone had to see. Children, traitors, travelers, people going about their lives, passing by a man gasping for air, pinned like a warning sign. And slowly, that image burned into the collective mind. Rome was always watching. This was psychological warfare, pure and simple. Crucifixion was never for Roman citizens, unless the crime was severe enough. It was for the outcasts, the slaves, the rebels, the lesser people. To be crucified was to be erased. Your name, your honor, your place in society. Even after death, the punishment lingered. Most bodies were never claimed. They were left to rot, picked apart by animals, not just forgotten, erased. The Roman historian Tacitus put it bluntly, punishments were not just for justice. They were designed to terrorize. And crucifixion? It was the empire's final word, not a sentence, an exclamation point. But what about the ones who carried it out? The soldiers, the ones swinging the hammers. They weren't machines. They had families, homes, routines. And yet, this was their job, to torture people into death. Some became numb. Some reveled in it. We have records of soldiers joking, gambling, even betting on how long someone would last. The cross was their workspace, and pain was their currency. And when it ended, if a family had wealth or favor, permission might be granted to take the body down. But usually there was no one to ask, and so the earth beneath the crosses became a graveyard, not of tombstones, but of bones and silence. But the cross didn't stay a symbol of terror forever. In chapter 3, we'll follow the trail of one particular crucifixion on a hill called Golgotha, a moment in history where a method of shame became a symbol of salvation. How did the cross go from horror to hope? That story is next. The cross reclaimed, how a tool of terror became a symbol of hope. Up until now, we've explored crucifixion as a brutal punishment crafted by Rome, perfected through pain, and delivered in front of crowds that came to watch others unravel. But something changed. Somehow, this symbol of cruelty, the cross, was transformed. It didn't vanish. It evolved from a blood-soaked scaffold to the centerpiece of the world's largest religion. How? Let's go back. It's the 1st century, a dusty hill outside Jerusalem. 3 crosses rise against a gray sky. 2 criminals, one man between them, condemned, mocked, whipped nearly to death. His name? Jesus of Nazareth. He wasn't a soldier, he wasn't a criminal, he was a teacher, a healer, a threat, not to Rome's armies, but to its control over hearts and minds. And that made him dangerous. Jesus was crucified during Passover, a time of political tension and heavy Roman presence. The religious elite accused him of blasphemy. The Roman authorities saw a man stirring up the crowds, so they acted. Pontius Pilate, Rome's local enforcer, ordered his execution. But make no mistake, this wasn't just another execution. This was strategic, a spectacle meant to crush hope before it could spread. For those who followed Jesus, the cross was a disaster. Their leader, humiliated, nailed up for all to see. No victory, no miracle, just blood and silence. It wasn't just death. It was the kind of death designed to erase someone from history. But then, something unexpected happened. 3 days after the crucifixion, his followers began to spread a new message, that Jesus had risen from the dead, that the cross wasn't the end, it was the beginning. To them, the cross didn't defeat Jesus. It fulfilled his mission. What Rome used to shame him became the very proof of his divinity. And just like that, the cross began to change, not in shape, but in meaning, from a weapon of fear to a sign of forgiveness, from a tool of domination to a declaration of freedom. This shift didn't happen overnight. It took generations of persecution, preaching, and persistence. But slowly, the symbol that once stood for death began to speak of life. To early Christians, the cross wasn't just a memory, it was a triumph. They believed that Jesus willingly embraced the cross, not out of weakness, but out of purpose. He didn't avoid pain. He absorbed it. He didn't flee death. He walked straight into it. And in doing so, turned a symbol of horror into hope. It's paradoxical, isn't it? That the very thing designed to destroy could become a foundation for healing. But that's the core of the Christian message. That redemption can be born from suffering, that resurrection can follow death, and that what was once meant to silence can become the loudest voice of all. As theologian N.T. Wright explains, the cross was not simply a brutal death, it was the decisive moment when the powers of evil were confronted and defeated. To the early church, crucifixion wasn't an embarrassment. It was a badge of honor, a scandal, yes, but a sacred one. As Christianity spread, from Jerusalem to Antioch, from Athens to Rome, the cross went with it. Painted in catacombs, carved into tombstones, worn as a secret sign among the persecuted. The Roman Empire, once the wielder of the cross, eventually bowed before it. By the 4th century, under Emperor Constantine, the cross became the official emblem of the faith, the same empire that used crucifixion to silence rebels. Now marched beneath its shape. It's a strange twist, isn't it? The cross that once hung criminals now hangs in churches, adorns necklaces, crowns cathedrals. Millions kneel before it, not in fear but in faith, not because they forget what it was, but because they remember, because at its core, the cross is still what it always was, a place where humanity and horror meet, a place where power and vulnerability collide. And yet, it's been given new life, not sanitized, but sanctified. As author Fleming Rutledge writes, the crucifixion is the touchstone of Christian authenticity. It is the unique feature by which everything else is measured. In other words, without the cross, Christianity has no center, and without its pain, there is no promise. Today, the cross stands not just as a religious symbol, but as a paradox. It reminds us of suffering, of injustice, but also of the possibility of transformation, that even in history's darkest moments, there can be light. Whether or not you believe in the theology behind it, the journey of the cross, from gallows to glory, is one of the most dramatic reversals in human history. It's a symbol that refuses to fade, because it was never meant to stay buried. In the next chapter, we'll peel back the layers of religious tradition to examine the archaeological evidence behind crucifixion, what bones, wood, and iron can still tell us today. Because beneath the theology, the history still bleeds. Bones and iron, the archaeology of crucifixion. Faith tells one kind of story, Scripture tells another. But bones? Bones don't lie. They don't preach or persuade, they preserve. And when it comes to crucifixion, this ancient state-sanctioned form of execution, bones, nails, and splinters are among the few surviving witnesses left. So today, we leave behind the Gospels and the philosophies and step into the dirt, into the grave, where history leaves its fingerprints in the dust. In 1968, just north of Jerusalem, workers digging a tomb came across a limestone ossuary, a bone box. It wasn't flashy. It looked like any other relic of the era, but inside it was something extraordinary. The calcified remains of a young man, and sticking straight through his heel bone, an iron nail. His name etched onto the box, Yehohanan, son of Haggakol. 2,000 years dead, but still speaking. Yehohanan is the only known physical evidence of crucifixion ever unearthed. We have thousands of texts. But this is a body. Proof that crucifixion wasn't just a story, it was a process. And in that heel bone, archaeologists found a silent echo of everything we've discussed. The violence, the precision, the message. The nail had gone in clean, but bent at the tip, probably from hitting a knot in the wood. It couldn't be pulled out, so they buried him with it still inside. The angle of the nail, combined with the location of the puncture, tells a story. Yehohanan's feet were likely nailed side by side, not overlapped. His arms were outstretched, either roped or nailed through the wrists. Fragments of olive wood found in the tomb suggest the beam was made from a tree commonly used for fuel, cheap and available. This wasn't artistry, it was utility, pain delivered efficiently with the tools of the everyday. But here's the thing, crucifixion leaves very little behind. Why? Because soft tissue decays, wood rots, iron corrodes, and crucified bodies were rarely buried in family tombs. They were tossed, left to animals, or buried in mass graves with no markers, no prayers. The fact that we have even one nailed heel, it's nothing short of a miracle. In recent years, more remains have been uncovered, fragments in Italy, in England, in Egypt. In 2021, archaeologists in the UK found a man's heel pierced by a Roman nail in a burial site near Cambridgeshire. Same story, different soil. Another confirmation that this was not an isolated cruelty, but a widespread policy. Rome didn't just kill you, they made sure it stuck, in memory, in message, in matter. Experts like Dr. Joe Zias, a forensic anthropologist who studied Yehohanan's remains, emphasize the importance of physical evidence in understanding crucifixion. Ancient texts often contradicted one another, religious accounts sanitized or dramatized. But a heel bone? It has no agenda. It's honest. It bleeds truth in calcium and iron. And yet, how strange is it that one of the most notorious punishments in history left behind so little? Think about that. Rome crucified thousands, maybe tens of thousands, and yet their remains have all but vanished, not because they never existed, but because the world moved on and left them buried without names. Crucifixion wasn't just brutal, it was disposable. Museums today display these artifacts like treasures, glass cases hold nails like relics. But what we're really seeing is pain. The weight of an empire's cruelty concentrated into a 7-inch spike. We stare at it, safely removed by centuries. But for the victims, it was the final chapter in a life erased with wood and iron. For those who believe, these relics hold dual meaning. They're proof of suffering, but also of prophecy fulfilled. The physical evidence aligns, eerily precisely, with descriptions in religious texts. From the placement of the nails to the position of the body to the cause of death by suffocation. Science and Scripture, strange bedfellows, both pointing to the same brutal truth. But even beyond faith, the story of crucifixion challenges us. It asks, how much cruelty can a civilization normalize? What does it say about us that we made torture a ritual, a spectacle, a message? Today we no longer crucify people, at least not with nails, but public shaming, dehumanization, slow erasure. That hasn't disappeared. The cross may have changed forms, but its shadow still lingers in the way we treat the powerless. As archaeologist Byron McCain once said, when you find a crucified man's remains, you're not just holding bones, you're holding the evidence of state terror. The cross wasn't just punishment, it was policy. And now, here we are. 2 millennia later, still fascinated, still horrified, still trying to understand how something so monstrous became part of our collective DNA. Whether worn around necks or studied in labs, the cross continues to haunt, not because of what it symbolizes today, but because of what it really was. The empire within, why crucifixion, still matters today. We've walked through bloodied streets. We've stood in the shadow of wooden beams. We've watched history unravel at the end of a nail. But now, we ask the deeper question, not what crucifixion was, but why it was ever needed. Why did one of the most advanced empires in the world create something so dehumanizing, so publicly cruel, and call it justice? Why did crowds cheer for suffering? Why did governments codify torture? To answer that, we don't need to look at ancient Rome. We need only look in the mirror. Because the tools may have changed, the robes replaced by suits, the wooden beams swapped for digital screens. But the instinct to control through fear, to break the human spirit for power's sake, that never left us. Crucifixion wasn't born from Roman soil alone. It was born from the parts of ourselves we'd rather not see. And today, while we no longer raise literal crosses, we still weaponize humiliation. We still put people on display, strip away their humanity, and call it justice. Think of how we treat the marginalized. Think of how we mock the weak, how we turn suffering into entertainment, how we scroll past videos of violence, share failures, laugh at breakdowns. The ancient crowd still exists, it just holds phones now. The platform may have changed, but the spectacle remains. Systems of power have always relied on fear to survive. Crucifixion was efficient because it didn't just end life, it crushed hope. It said, "This is what happens if you resist." Today the message is subtler. It's written in policies, in silence, in who gets heard, and who gets crucified by indifference. And there's a darker truth. People learn to look away. They grow numb. In ancient Jerusalem, crucifixions became routine. People passed by without flinching. It became normal, acceptable. And once something is normalized, it no longer feels evil, just necessary, just the way things are. So maybe the Roman Empire isn't gone. Maybe it moved into our institutions, our attitudes, our excuses. The empire lives where apathy thrives, where cruelty hides behind law, where silence lets the cross rise again and again, without wood, without nails, but with the same crushing weight. The truth is uncomfortable. Every generation has its own crosses, and every generation must decide. Will we build them, or will we break them apart? Will we look away as others are shamed, silenced, and destroyed? Or will we step forward, even if our voice shakes, and say, "No more"? Author Elie Wiesel once wrote, "The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference." That's the real legacy of the cross. Not just pain, but the silence that allowed it, the crowd that did nothing, the system that thrived on complicity. Ironically, the very tool used to suppress rebellion became the symbol of a global movement. The cross was meant to erase a man from history. Instead, it made him the center of it. But let's not forget, Rome didn't fear the man, they feared his message. Love your enemy, lift the poor, challenge corruption, tear down injustice. And that scared them more than swords. Crucifixion still matters, not just for Christians, not just for historians, but for anyone trying to understand how power twists justice and how we justify the inexcusable when it benefits us. It's not just a story of ancient nails and wood. It's a mirror, and it shows us what we are capable of, both in cruelty and in redemption, because for every hammer raised in hate, there's a hand that can raise someone in love. For every voice that mocks the weak, there's another that speaks truth into silence. The cross teaches us the worst of what we've done, but it also dares us to do better. So now that you've seen it all, not the clean, polished cross behind altars, but the raw, historical horror behind it, what will you do with it? Will it haunt you, or will it move you? Will you look away, or will you look deeper? Crucifixion was Rome's way of saying, "We have the final word." But history answered back. The cross didn't disappear, it transformed. And now it asks each of us, will we continue the legacy of pain, or will we rewrite the story? Thank you for taking this journey through faith, through history, through the darkest parts of human nature. If this series has stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Talk, reflect, act, because the cross may be ancient, but the choice it presents is eternal. If this story shook you, if it forced you to reconsider what you thought you knew about the Vikings, give this video a thumbs up and share it with a fellow history lover. What other ancient punishments or legends should we explore next? And do you think there's anything more terrifying than the blood eagle? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and never underestimate the past.